Welcome back. We are going to start right in with our meditation. Before we begin, I just want to check the volume. Is everybody able to hear? All right, great. Thank you. I invite you to settle in. Take a moment to get nice and comfy. Put down any notebooks, laptops, anything you might be holding. And allow yourself to become fully present. And really just step into this time that we have to grow and expand and experience our infinite nature. But allow yourself to let go of the busyness of our lunch break if it was busy for you. And coming back into this time and this place where we will once again discover and embody your infinite self as we return our sense of identity home. We're going to begin journeying from your body, from your mind, from your limited concept of who you are, back to your eternal, infinite beingness. This is who you really are, the seat of infinite beingness from which all is manifest. I invite you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths in and out. In and out. And with your eyes closed, focus your attention inward toward your heart center. Notice that there is a presence, a spirit, an aliveness here. As your attention remains on this presence, observe what you can notice about it. It's pure. It's peaceful. It's complete. It's unchanging. It's never ending. In the silence surrounding this presence, just simply observe. Now, visualize this presence as a ball of energy, a radiant mass of light eternally shining at the center of your soul. As your attention remains on this ball of light energy, notice it's getting larger and larger and larger until it finally engulfs you so fully that you are at the very center of its eternal glow. From the center, feel the light radiating from you in all directions. Encompassing your consciousness and your body. Radiating out and encompassing your city. In all directions, encompassing your country, your planet, and outward still to encompass your universe. And beyond. Like a projector focusing light on an empty screen of space, all existence is now projecting from the center of your soul, from the center of you. You are the source and the expression of it all. Think of your present circumstances, your relationships, your finances, your world, and know that it is you who projects it all. And notice how, from this place, nothing is impossible. It is you who gives life to the entirety of existence. Notice how all appearances you encounter are simply your light projecting outward. As you remain eternally still, peaceful, and complete, your beingness is at the center of it all. This is who you really are. You are infinite beingness. I invite you to breathe in, allowing this feeling, this presence, and this state to fill your body. As you bring this awareness into your physical state of being, breathing in and out. Begin to feel your body. Merge the presence that you've just experienced into your body, feeling your body in your seat, feeling the floor beneath you, the earth beneath you, with your arms and your hands resting on your body. Breathe in Move your shoulders, your fingers, your toes. Bring your awareness back to the present moment, the present place. And take a moment to integrate this experience. And when you're ready, maybe another grounding breath and gently open your eyes, refreshed and renewed and ready to come together again in this place of expansion and exploration, led and guided with the amazing Michael Gustin. Oh, welcome back, everybody.
Oh, welcome. Welcome to session 2. It is 1:11 p.m. Mountain Time. What a time to be alive, as consciousness experiencing itself. How was the first session? How did everybody enjoy it? Would love to hear your comments in the chat box. So go ahead and share at your convenience. You know, I know a lot of you are eager to get to the activation and the tangibilities of this, and we're going to get there. But in order to get there, we need to take the journey that we're taking today. And so I'm really excited to dive into session 2. And while we were at lunch, I did a little bit of modification to our presentation to not only go a little bit deeper, but to give some more illustrations of some of the things that we were talking about earlier. So let's look at a little recap of session 1. Just super quick. We're going to dive into that. So ultimately, in session 1, we did a couple things. We discussed the anatomy of reality. We discussed how consciousness filters itself through the world and ultimately comes into form and understand what we call condition and circumstance. We really detailed the path from which light forms into matter, which we call the human experience. We also discussed how source consciousness awareness, the fundamental being that we are, is prior to the mind, prior to the world, prior to meaning, and ultimately that this priority that we are is the very substance, the very cause substance, as Neville might call it, from which the entire world comes into being from. We dove into some of the great spiritual teachers of our time and times before, understanding from multiple perspectives. And one of the reasons we did this was because in this, we've brought both Eastern and Western teachings together to reconcile a very singular worldview that supports where we're moving today. As I'm sure you know, this kind of quote, Nisargadatta, very Eastern, Taoist, Tao Te Ching, that sort of thing. Neville Goddard, of course, Western, and so on and so forth. We also talked about ultimately how the emptiness of space is more reflective of the cause substance that we are than the forms of matter that show up, and how the forms of matter are reflective mechanisms rather than cause substances. We dove into the high-level logistics of how we manifest, right? Understanding that mind is the filter that condition source infinite potential into form. And as a matter of fact, what we hold in mind is what manifests. Understanding why things manifest easy, why they don't. Understanding the layers of density. If you were taking notes, I really hope that you wrote this down, as it will provide heavy support for you in the future. Remembering that realm 1 and realm 2 are 0 density, light density is realm 3, and realm 4 is heavy density. Hence, it is the hardest density or the hardest realm to affect change in. We also dove into the fact that ultimately we need to go beyond realm 4 and realm 3, or should I say prior to realm 4 and realm 3, aka realm 1, to understand how source experiences itself through infinite and polar intelligence with the least amount of density possible, right? We really started highlighting the 0 density state, and this is where reality begins to bend around you. Quick recap for the first session. I hope you had an amazing time. Now let's dive into session 2. In fact, we can do that. I just need to switch my tab open. So session 2, what we're going to be talking about in session 2, a multitude of things, not only the substance of reality, we're going to be illustrating some of the concepts we mentioned here in session 1, but diving into the logistics, the tonalities, the substance, the essence of the zero density state. The goal here, here's the thing, just so you can understand this, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own journey. When you're taking a piece of information as it relates to spirituality and integrating it, what's happening here is most of the time it starts mentally. It starts mentally. We intellectually get it. You might have said that to yourself at one point. And then at a certain point, your heart center experiences it. And the interesting thing here kind of revolves around everything that we're talking about, is that the heart center and what it experiences ultimately becomes reality for us. So the goal here is to educate you intellectually with our sporadic guided meditations at the beginning of every session on what the zero density state is, right? What that top state looks like, why it is what it is, how it is what it is, looking at it mentally, intellectually. And as we move further on through session 2, 3, and 4, especially in session 4, we are going to move into the experience of it. And the hypothesis is that your body will take this understanding and continue to run with it for ultimately ever, but we're really going to help you fine tune that in the 6 weeks of support that are following the retreat. Awesome. I am so ridiculously excited for session 2. I wanted to bring a couple images to mind for everybody, just so we could really understand some of the illustrations that were going on earlier. Ultimately, right here, it's a very simple image of white light dispersing into multiple forms. And when I look at consciousness experiencing itself, when I look at level 1 impeding into realm 2, realm 3, and realm 4, this is exactly what is seen. You could almost look at this right here as realm 1 and realm 2. Right here, this crystal prism, you can look at realm 3. The crystal is a container for memory, but ultimately what's interesting about crystal lattices is the memory that is stored inside of them can be altered. So crystals do not have inherent meaning, but the energy that they do give off is very, very potent and tangible. So you can look at the prism here ultimately as realm 3. And then ultimately, as mind disperses into form of matter, right? Density, gold, emotion, ego, conscious, subconscious, vibration, compartmentalization, rationalization, the consciousness that we are disperses into what seems to be differences. And what's really interesting here is that these colors, when you look at a spectrum, these colors are aspects. They are all aspects of this. They are not separate in any way, shape, or form. The only difference between here and here is this. This is the deciding factor, right? How a crystal lattices are shaped and formed has a direct effect on how light penetrates that crystal and protrudes out of the other side. Because again, the crystal, like the mind, is a vehicle that awaits form, and form is commanded through memory and meaning. Really interesting example. I love this. It's definitely shown in our culture, but I think it's worth diving into. Now, we also talked about this earlier. If you have not heard about this, it's awesome. One of the first, what I really feel like modern quantum physics experiments to illustrate what we're talking about here, ultimately demonstrating that pure light filtered through a screen with 2 slits protrudes onto a screen with an interface, an interference mechanism. So ultimately, this image is not actually the totality of the experience. What happens here is that this screen with 2 slits acts as a condition for that light. What happens here is there's an interference mechanism that can be a multitude of things. Sometimes they use a board, sometimes they use a piece of paper. There's a multitude of interference mechanisms that can be used. But ultimately what happens here is that this light that is scattered on the wall is directly proportionate to how the light filters through these 2 slits and then interacts with the interference mechanism. In other words, there is no permanent pattern of light until it's determined by how the light filters through the two slits in the interference mechanism. And I find that that's so interesting because what this tells me is that light, as it is filtered, as it is manipulated, right, or formed, conditioned, it takes on different appearances. And although the appearances may seem to be different, they are all a product of the same cause substance, which is light. In this case, it's a sodium lamp. Starting off this session strong, nothing is inherently real. And when we use the word real here, here's the thing. If you go to Webster's Merriam Dictionary and look up the definition of real, it says objective, not imagined. And so automatically, here's the thing. I know that we all silently agree on the definitions of words, but as you know, and as I know, the definition of a word is very dependent upon ultimately a multitude of factors, most importantly, the meaning and worldview that is assigned. And so Western culture, what's really interesting, and I remember I made this post on Facebook probably 7 years ago, and I've deactivated my Facebook. Thank God, no more distractions. But it was a very interesting post because not until a couple hundred years ago did we as humans begin to look at reality as something objective to ourselves. If you research Native American cultures, Eastern cultures that were very in tune with their land, their environment, right? These Egyptians that are literally, I mean, insanely in touch with themselves. They never regarded their environment as something existing objectively to themselves. They regarded their environment to be something that they existed on an interconnected level with, to such a degree, check this out, that the length of the greatest pyramid of Giza is actually a couple decimals apart, but the same number as the speed of light. If you take its diameter, excuse me, I'm not a geometry expert here, but essentially the length from one corner to another, it literally is the same number sequence as the speed of light. The only difference is there's obviously decimals because the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. You move the decimal over and you find the diameter radius of the pyramid. And I think it's so interesting. What happens when you begin to work in tandem with nature is that you find things to be a little more flexible. And when you talk about reality here, when we're talking about nothing being inherently real, again, I go back to Rupert Spira. And if you've not gotten to Rupert Spira, amazing Western dichotomy and distillation of non-duality that I think a lot of you would very much appreciate. But he says it's not that nothing is real, it's that nothing is what it seems to be, right? Because at the end of the day, it is very real. Everything is the totality of the universe experiencing itself. We are the manifestation of God, so to speak, right? That is exactly what we are. And that is very real, but it's not that things are not real. It is that they are not what they seem to be. And what's interesting is that going back to William Blake, I believe it's William Blake, he said, what seems to be is for those to whom it seems to be, right? That was written in 1885. So if we recount that in modern day Ebonics, we would say, yo, the way it is always going to be the way it is for the person that says that's the way it is. Feel a little Key and Peele coming through there, right? Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard people say that's the way it is? Dude, if I get triggered by any statement, it's that one. There is no statement that makes me scoff so much. And not because I'm like, oh, this person's dumb or whatever, but I'm like, dude, if you only knew that you were cementing your destiny by saying those kinds of things. But in the same token, we can begin to hack, right? Because what seems to be is what seems to be for those to whom it seems to be. So when I understand that nothing is what it seems to be, and I discover what it actually is, which is infinite consciousness, temporarily conditioned into a specific form and fashion, and I understand that that same consciousness can be altered through conception, and through the altering of conception, the experience relative to that conception also changes. I can realize then fundamentally nothing is inherently objective. Nothing is inherently permanent, definitely permanent. Nothing exists permanently. Everything dies, everything is fading, everything is fleeting, except for the beingness that we are. And it's just a wonderful thing. Because when a thought, feeling, or perception feels real, it's because we're assigning meaning to it, right? It's so interesting when you have a eureka moment. When you have a eureka moment, most of the time you're dealing with a problem that you've had, and you all of a sudden you have a solution that comes to mind, right? Eureka, or I've found it, I've done it. What's so interesting here is the eureka moment is a direct byproduct of reassigning meaning. 99% of eureka moments happen, when we are not struggling internally about the thing that we want, right? Think about it. Think about the last time you got an aha moment. Was it in a moment of struggle? No, it was when you were doing something completely different. So in that moment, the assignments of meaning that you carried were not as intense as they were in the moment of struggle. But when we take a thought, a feeling, a perception, it feels real because we're assigning some sense of objective meaning to it. And this literally applies to everything. And that's where this begins to break down culturally, because the truth is, our society is really just a collective hallucination. I mean, we stare at trees and we make meaning out of them. Open a book, right? I am just hallucinating vividly when I dive into this, when I immerse myself into this. And ultimately, then we get into the logistics of language, but we're not going to go there because that could take us on a tangent that could take us to a lot of different places that may be or may not be irrelevant to where we're going. But when a thought or feeling or perception feels real, it only feels real because we've assigned some sort of meaning to it, right? We've assigned meaning to it. When you're not in a state of fear, you're not actively assigning meaning about fear to your life. But then the moment you assume something to be true, it's because you're assigning it. You're assigning meaning. You're saying, well, this means this, therefore I respond this way. This means this, therefore I respond this way. My responses to things are always about the meaning that I've assigned to them, more than it ever is about the thing itself. And so when I begin to play with this, I begin to understand that a lot of my beliefs, especially the ones that seem harder to get rid of, they've really just been meaning wrapped on repeat, right? Because what happens from in the high level cycle of thoughts becoming things, right? Be my beingness, it filters through thoughts, perceptions, which then action. We bring it over here. We've got outcome. And then what happens after an outcome? A reaction. And what does a reaction do? If you've ever played Chutes and Ladders, a reaction starts the cycle all the way over. Reaction directly influences how things unfold, because what a reaction does is it confirms our self-image in that moment. My reactions to life are directly correlated to what I am believing to be true in that moment. And so there's no cycle that you're going to get yourself out of where you don't, at some point in this process, reassign meaning. I respond certain ways to certain events because of the experiences that I've had in the past, the beliefs that came from those experiences, and ultimately my unwillingness to explore anything else to be objectively true. And that's the real kicker here, is that objectivity in and of itself is a lie. Objectivity is really subjectivity in disguise. More importantly, I think objectivity is subjectivity completely solidified. Meaning, density. Meaning, density. Meaning literally correlates the psychological makeup of a subject. Meaning correlates to the psychological makeup of a subject in the same way an atomic structure constitutes the form and fashion of matter. Meaning is where I create the atomic structure of my beliefs. Because in my meaning, I'm either assigning a heaviness, I'm assigning a lightness, or I'm assigning nothing. See, that's what you'll realize here is that the further you go on this journey, the less you are able to control things. Because the cycles and the patterns, the generation of manifestation happens on its own. And that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about in this session. Too many of us try and insert ourselves too deeply into our manifestation, inadvertently holding us up. And because the universe is consciousness, we talk about formless infinite consciousness. There is no inherent meaning in anything until it is defined. And if you want some supplemental reading material here, I would recommend A Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles is an amazing book that I'm not going to get into, but if you're looking for some reading, that would be amazing for you. But I understand that there's no meaning in anything, right? And the true power, the causality of my life becomes the state of consciousness that I am in any given moment. Really. Because we talk about miracles, right? We talk about things happening that defy the laws of physics, things happening. And I'll tell you what, I saw it all the time. You know, during my time as a Christian, I saw people raised from the dead. I saw feet grow out of stub legs. I saw blind people see for the first time in 30 years. I mean, you name it. I saw food appear out of thin air. I saw money appear out of thin air. Like I have stories and stories and stories for days of phenomena defying the law of physics. And every single time, whether I was the one that was a vehicle for that manifestation or I witnessed somebody else being a vehicle for that manifestation, now looking at that in hindsight, their state of consciousness was truly infinite. Anytime I laid my hands on somebody and healed them, I was in no way, shape, or form concerned with any sense of limitation. Because I was convinced that I was not doing it. It was God doing it. And in that context, think about how that affected my state of consciousness. Even though I interpreted what was going on through a dualistic lens, my state of consciousness, my density was ridiculously light. And that was probably one of my favorite parts about that time in my life, was playing with the lightness and heaviness of manifestation. And I wouldn't have termed it that at that time, but I now understand that every time I saw a miracle performed or some sort of amazing thing happening, whether it was big or small, the common pattern was a zero density state. And I can promise, and here's the thing, we talk about that in the context of healing and shit appearing out of thin air, but I want to take that and apply it to the practical things too, right? If you're at work and you get stuck on a subject, somebody's pissing you off, somebody's irritating you, you could sit there and you can dwell on that. You can do your thing. You could also completely recalibrate your state of consciousness to where you're not even aware of, or you're not even taking that meaning that this person is projecting to be objectively true, responding in such a way that their response changes as well. See, but a lot of the times what we don't consider here is, the world changes because we change. Most of the time, if somebody is yelling at you and angry at you or piercing at you, and you respond with pure love, you don't get upset or angry. And here's the thing, there's context. I'm not speaking in the context of abusive relationships or domestic violence. I'm speaking here, maybe you're with a colleague or a friend, they're getting upset and you receive that in such a way that you don't take offense. There's considerable notice on that person's end. And I've seen it every single time. And in fact, I would say that state of consciousness, being able to maintain that state of consciousness actually does more of a job affecting the other person than any sort of visualization or anything that you could possibly do. And on top of that, what it does for you is not only keeps you centered, but allows you to navigate that situation in a way that creates at least a benefit for yourself. At least a benefit for yourself. But the moment you get caught up in taking other people's meaning to be objectively true for yourself, you lose so much of your power. And this is why the dark night of the soul is what it is. The dark night of the soul is really nothing more than a complete reassignment of meaning. And the reason the dark night of the soul feels so scary is because so many of the things that were true for us for so long are no longer true. And if we can come out on the other side being okay with that, we can see considerable transformation. I see a lot of people that come to the law of attraction space from Christianity, from Catholicism, from other more monotheistic religions that have very masculine underlying structures. And I see a lot of people come to the law of attraction manifesting and then go back. I don't judge them, but I understand why, because at the end of the day, their fundamental beliefs about God and Jesus or whoever they believe in were always 10 times stronger than anything they entertained about the law of attraction. The reason people go back, we go back and we revert, is not because what we revert to is objectively true. It's because that truth was more true for us than whatever it is that we tried to explore. This is why you have a responsibility to get to the bottom of yourself. Because the question you have to ask yourself is, how much of the meaning I'm assigning to my life is other people's meaning? How many of the limitations that I'm placing on myself are limitations that I actually never really consciously gave consent to? I just believed were the way it was because other people said that's the way it was. Right? Part of this journey is a complete death and transformation. For most of you, and I would venture to say for all of us, most of our social groups change when we go through this process. Honestly, everything changes because we are changing. And so as we assign meaning, layer 3, right? You can call that the glass prism that we saw in the earlier illustration, right? It's assigned as ultimately it's always based on memory, right? You think about something new that you're experiencing. Think about, you're going to maybe have tapas for the first time, or you're going to do some sort of adventure, some sort of activity, and you're with somebody that you trust and they say, this is how this is, X, Y, and Z, right? If you've never experienced that before, you've never had an introduction to that before, what's going to be to happen the next time you experience that thing? You're going to immediately revert to the meaning that was assigned from the conversation that you had with the person that you really trusted. Meaning is not assigned until it's assigned. And when it's assigned, ultimately the memory of it shows up until we create new memory. And what is memory but felt consent into what is happening? And I use that word consent in the context of I'm allowing this sensation to penetrate my body and not resisting it. We're going to come back to that because I think there's a lot to unpack there. But ultimately, memory is the past appearing real. Memory is the past appearing real because we use our memory to dictate what we should do now. And when we bring that to life, we bring it to life. This is why Neville's whole revision technique is about re-experiencing your past. Because the moment, think about this, the cycles that we get into are literally a byproduct of the meaning we assign and how we relate to ourselves and how we came out of certain experiences. And so if I can redefine an experience that my body had with a specific subject, if I can literally retrain the memory, reassign the memory, all of a sudden, I'm going to respond differently to that subject. Why? Because my memory around it has changed. And a lot of people get tripped up on this because they say, well, is it right for me to alter my memory? Is it right for me to do this? The truth is, man, your brain already alters your memory. So many of your memories are already altered just by the fact that they're sitting in your body. We rarely remember things 100% as they happen. What happens most of the time is the experiences that we have culminate with other experiences and convolute meaning and assignments, which ultimately leads us down most of the time a road of self-victimization, and ultimately perpetuating the shitty cycles that we do not want. And the truth is, man, nobody's here to invalidate anything that you've been through. And it's really important to acknowledge that, right? Going through what I went through as a child, like I could revise a million different ways what happened to me. At the end of the day, nobody will ever be able to deny the fact that I was raped. But how I relate to that situation, how I relate to the person that did it, how I relate to myself, right? What did that do for me before I started doing this work? Well, I'll tell you what, there was definitely a sense of sexual inefficiency. I'm not talking about sex. I'm just talking in general, intimacy, right? There was a sense of need, codependency, so many different factors that came out of that experience as a direct byproduct of A, what I believe to be true about myself, B, how my body received the experience, and then the third point ultimately being how I related to anything when I could have thought that the potential was there for that to happen again. And as I go through that process and I begin to really give myself the love that needs to be held there and understand that, hey, you know what? I'm not defined by what happened to me. That event fundamentally has no effect on my efficiency, my ability, or my lack thereof. And to the degree in which I give that life, it becomes life, right? To the degree in which I believe that my mom abandoning me as an orphan and leaving me on the ground for 12 hours a day while she did meth, to the degree in which I believe that affects me, it affects me. Sure, there have been subconscious patterns that have come up as a result of that. But I can tell you what, the more I stand in my power, and I don't give her that power, I don't give that power away, I stand it and recognize my own wholeness, the weight that that event has on me begins to decrease. And this is where we're talking about getting fully committed to this. Because in order for you to get to that place, you have to completely reassign meaning. You can't half-ass it. And ultimately, as long as that memory is structured in the way that it's structured, anytime anything happens that, even if it really couldn't, but my brain believes my safety is threatened, all of those flags are going to go up. I'm going to re-experience that. I'll tell you what, and I didn't think I was going to bring it up, but here we are. I was in a car accident on Thursday. And it really wasn't a bad car accident. It was not that bad. But I was in a car accident 13 years ago where I was rear-ended at 85 miles an hour in Palm Springs. And I dealt with a plethora of issues for years. And what I realized after I got in this car accident on Thursday, I can't tell you what, I mean, I could, but I'm not going to go into it. But I tell you what, the freakouts, right? The anxiety, the fear. I mean, so many different things came up. My body was overstimulated. And I had to sit with it. I had to sit with it until yesterday afternoon. Honestly, I had an amazing call with somebody that's actually on this call, Marco. And it helped me pull myself out of where I was, out of that traumatic response, and back into a place of fullness. And you guys got what you got last night as a result, right? It's not about bad things not happening. It's about assigning the meaning to the things that happen. Because the truth is, I could have sat in that this whole weekend. And in fact, the team even asked me if I wanted to reschedule the retreat. But I realized that if I could pull myself out, if I could accept the traumatic response that my body was having, and then allow myself to not be defined by that traumatic response, how much more would I be in integrity with what we're teaching you here today? And that's what this is really about for me. We take this seriously, folks. Like, this is not some Joel Osteen sermon. We really take these things very, very seriously and apply them to some of the most exacerbated areas of our life. However, the past doesn't exist, so meaning is an illusion. Holy shit, what just happened? The past doesn't exist, so meaning is an illusion. Quantum physics tells us that the past, the present, and the future are happening all at the same time. And ultimately, when we step outside of a three-dimensional space that is governed by height and width and depth, and we enter into a five-dimensional space, the ability to travel across multiple dimensions becomes something that's capable for us. And so when we talk about, and I know there's a very high level thing, don't worry about it. The past not existing refers more so to what happens when we occupy this zero density state. When we're living from this place of infinity, of beingness, of ultimate awareness. What meaning at all has any objectivity in light of that awareness? None. So fundamentally, meaning itself is untrue. Just like states of consciousness are unalive until we give them life. I understand it that we remember the story, that we give to the memory and our thoughts about the story, but not the memory itself. Absolutely. I think that's when we get down into the semantics, because the memory in a lot of ways is the story, because how we remember something directly affects what we believe about ourselves and our environment. And so I think a lot of that becomes semantical and intertwined, but that is a very good point. And so achieving the zero density state where desire is effortless requires giving up the belief in external meaning, right? We want to talk about giving up credibility to anything outside of our awareness. Technically, nothing, right? What exists outside of our awareness? Nothing. Giving up credibility and power to that which may tell us that we are limited. The reason the zero density state is so powerful is because you're physiologically experiencing that endlessness, right? The body keeps the score. And if self-concept turns into thought and story, which turns into feeling, which turns into action, which turns into outcomes, which turn into reaction, isn't it in my best interest to devise a self-concept that is impenetrable, that is immovable, that is in its substance, the totality of all that is? Because we talk about get into the state of the wish fulfilled. Sure, try and get into the state of the wish fulfilled, or get into the zero density state where time itself does not exist, where you are tangibly experiencing infinity and flow, and then bring your desire into play. Because again, the law doesn't change. What we feel ourselves to be, we become. What we're looking to do is understand the fundamental mechanisms of reality so that we can navigate that law in the easiest way possible. Effort exists in the mind. And we're going to dive into this. You know, for me, this was something I went back and forth on for a very long time until I truly became aware of the fact that physical action is, in fact, 100% of the time, a byproduct of movements in consciousness. Again, we want to revisit the fact that anything you are struggling with internally, when you try and take action externally, you feel heavy and incapable. Because everything starts in consciousness. So effort really doesn't even start in the body. It starts in consciousness, and the degree of effort that you will have to put forth is directly correlated to the fundamental identity that you believe yourself to be. And I'll tell you what, the more effort you put in mentally, the more struggle you'll have externally. What does Neville talk about? The law of least effort. I want to move from one state of consciousness to another with the least amount of effort, because the least amount of effort literally implicates power. You think about a king or a queen, right? What effort is involved in them getting what they want? Very little. Very little. And we use this contextually, because they know who they are, right? Of course they know who they are. They're not living from this place of being insufferable and puny. And I would venture to say that especially royalty and elites have such a sense of expectation that they truly believe everything that they want, they will get. And they don't have to do a lot to get it. Sorry, my eyes itching. And I think this is a really powerful perspective to play. What if I was to play the personality of the queen, the personality of the king? How I look at myself determines the intensity or lack thereof of the struggle I will experience on the way to creating what it is that I want. When we feel effort, it's the mind creating meaning around the action or the inaction taken. And this is experienced as heavy density, of course, which feels difficult, right? So we feel like, oh my God, I have to do all this, and this is so hard, and yada, yada, yada. Let's pause for a second, and let's examine where those beliefs come from. Let's examine where a heavy density consciousness comes from. It literally spawns from belief in finite existence. It spawns from this belief that I am fundamentally this individual experiencing something greater than myself. And the opposite could not be more true, because it is. And so ultimately, effort really is the mind creating a ton of meaning. Because what if I don't have to create meaning? What if I just know that I get what I want? What happens when I begin to play in that personality? I can't help but experience it in my world, because it literally adheres to the law, which does not change. And so, we've all had times when even the hardest action, I love how Dave put sports. Oh man, I love sports. Is full of flow, fun, and ease, right? And this is because the mind is not assigning meaning to the action. Energy is flowing through you, and your mind was focused solely on being I am. And I'm convinced this is why Abraham tells everybody, hey, you need to get on your high-flying disc. Maybe I think she calls it high vibrational disc, right? Because what happens when you're on your high vibrational disc? You're not assigning a ton of heavy meaning. You're not entering into a ton of density. When you're on a high vibrational disc, for a lack of better terms, you're interpreting things around you very specifically. And the interpretations of those things is not heavy, it is light. And so you maintain your place on a high vibrational disc by maintaining a conscious movement in the space of infinity. As long as I am incapable and limited and finite, the struggle is real. And it's an everlasting uphill battle. But it's like, the question I have for you is, how long do you want to fight that uphill battle? How long do you want to push against the momentum? Like, what if this really was all that you needed to know? it's amazing what happens when we begin to give ourselves the space to explore this. Because when you begin to explore that zero density state, you begin to really understand that you have a choice. And I think that's what the ultimate end of the manifestation journey is. Understanding that you have a choice as to how you are interpreting yourself, how you are bringing yourself energetically, emotionally, spiritually, physically to any given situation. And in any given moment, that can completely change through your willingness to drop the bullshit and settle in to the good shit. To settle in to beingness, to infinity, to flow in your body. Like, dude, what if it wasn't complicated? What if you knew by accessing more flow in your body through identification with zero density states, you would inadvertently get yourself everywhere you wanted? I'm convinced if you spent the next 6 months focusing only on the zero density state, you would see more progress in your manifestation than you would in the last 5 years. Because when you become obsessed with the journey, you're no longer needing to get to a destination, and you're focused on expanding the love and the freedom that exists inside of you, you cannot help not only to achieve your goals, but get exactly where you want to be. Because the truth is, you don't even want the things for what they are. You want the things because you think of the feelings that you think that those things are going to bring you. And the truth is, all of those feelings exist in the zero density state. We don't just want satisfaction, we want unconditional satisfaction. We don't just want joy, we want unconditional joy. We don't just want peace, we want unconditional peace. And this unconditional happens when I am no longer a conditioned being or identifying as a conditioned being. Because as long as I am identifying as a conditioned being, there are conditions that will be required in order to create the conditions that I want. And as long as I need the conditions to create more conditions and the conditions and conditions, dude, it gets denser and denser and denser and denser. And the truth is, this example right here, it applies to any area of life. In those moments of flow, your mind is not assigning a ton of meaning to the action that you're taking. Energy is flowing through you, and your mind is simply focused on being, on flow, on fun, on excitement. And think about that. Think about the vibration of excitement. Think about the vibration of fun. Think about the vibration of being stoked. They're all super light. Which is why, if you can immerse yourself in sensations and environments that are reflective of what you're wanting to create without judging them and simply enjoying them, you can bring your manifestation into existence that much quicker. You know, I remember when I really decided to take this conscious creation thing seriously, probably honestly 4 months before I met Dave. I had just got done at an audio engineering school in Nashville, and I had dropped out because I realized that they were focusing on live sound and I didn't want to focus on live sound. It's a great school, but was not my thing. You know, I'm not from the East Coast. I grew up in Southern California. And I remember leaving the school, I was in a ton of debt. I probably paid like $45,000 to go there. And I went back to my hometown, Indio. And I remember being in Indio, knowing that I had spent the previous 2 years, pretty much the duration of from the moment of my awakening to that moment, pursuing music, which was fine. It was great, loved it, had a great time, played festivals, whole 9 yards. But I realized that I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more, but I knew that I didn't really have any skills because I had spent the previous 7 years traveling the country, going hard for Jesus. And so I watched The Secret for the second time. The first time I watched The Secret, I was in rehabilitation in 2009. And lo and behold, I had no idea the impact that movie would have on me. But after I left audio engineering school, I watched The Secret again, and I became obsessed with one thing. I became obsessed with A, remembering that I was God, and B, feeling good. And I'll tell you what I did for the rest of my time in India, which was about, honestly, 30 days. I was only in India for 30 days at this point. I went to the richest parts of town, right? El Paseo and Palm Desert. It's where all the fancy, the Louis stores, the Rolex stores. I went to art galleries, right? Places where rich people hang out, a lot of communications in elegant environments. I immersed myself in high quality, high potency places, just enjoying them. I didn't go and say, well, you know what? I need to go buy this Rolex, but you can bet your ass I tried a Rolex on. I imagined myself walking out of my house and all these different things. Long story short, I immersed myself in being and flow and fun and excitement and stokage. And 30 days later, massive transformation. I found myself in a new relationship. My social class jumped ×4. And within 6 months, my income had jumped ×100. And I was spending probably 30 to 40 times what I was spending 6 months prior, which was nothing. And so, you're talking about going from homeless to multiple six figures in just a matter of a couple months. My complete lifestyle changed. I was wearing Movados. I was buying really expensive shit that, when it comes to financial literacy, it's a whole different conversation. But the truth is, I was at that higher level of social class that I had just committed to immersing myself in. And then ultimately that led to, right, getting the Tesla, spending that $100,000 on that car, getting into a $1.2 million house here in Colorado, and everything that entailed, right? Reality hacker. So many things happened when I chose to just immerse myself in the enjoyment of the feeling of expansion. And I've noticed it even since, right? 6 years after starting Reality Hacker, anytime I cut off that flow, I cut off that beingness, I place myself in a mode of constriction. The moment I need to figure it all out, it all falls apart. And I'm freaking preaching to myself here, dude. The moment I need to have it all figured out, the moment it all falls apart. And as I can flow and move without needing to assign a ton of meaning, to control everything, and just enjoy, I will find my body doing in such a way that I reproduce the very states that I've been intentional about. See, a lot of people's attachments to money prevent them from making more money. Your need to have money, your need to have wealth, your need to have luxury, your need to have this, it pushes you away from it. But as you are able to entertain the energy of that without conditioning it, without judging it, without needing it to appear a certain way, you experience more and more of it. And here's the thing about effortlessness. It's not in action. It's action without density, right? When's the last time you busted your ass, but didn't feel like you busted your ass because you were operating from a place of flow? I'll tell you what, I do it all the time for Reality Hacker, and I freaking love it. That's where you want to be. You want to be in a place where your effort exists without density. And that starts from really focusing and centering that zero density state. Because action is taken without density when the self-concept that precedes the action is not in contrarianship to it. Right? In other words, because that's the thing, this applies to both positive and negative things. This literally applies to both positive and negative cycles in our life. How easy is it? Think about a time when you were struggling in a very specific cycle. How easy was it for you to recreate the cycle? The same principle applies to positive and negative experiences. Effortlessness is not in action, it's action without density. And ultimately, density is very correlated to naturalness. A lot of the times too, sometimes thoughts can be really heavy, But because they're so natural for us, there's no resistance in the body to stop it. And so in that, the bodily action also follows a very similar process. Holy shit, I just destroyed my whole life. And I think you probably see this with alcoholism. Probably, honestly, one of the greatest examples I've seen of self-concepts driving behaviors that are, for the most part, unconscious, but truly endless, right? If you've ever known somebody that was a real alcoholic, you'll know that this process of effortlessness, drinking another beer, picking up another whatever, it's so natural because of the self-concept that the person has carried for so long, right? But on the positive side of things, action might be taken, but it feels inspired and full of flow, as if a more transcendent energy is channeling through your body and mind, right? It feels like in the midst of taking effort is effortless. And that's where I want to be, because here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and advocate sitting on your butt. I'm not. I'm a big fan of big things. I'm a big fan of big dreams. And I'm a big fan of telling our people to go after those big dreams. And I want to find a way to get to a place where the action that I'm taking feels inspired and full of flow. And what happens here when we begin to examine the dynamics and nuances of this, especially as it relates to something that we want, as long as my fundamental self-concept is separate from the thing that I want, my relationship to that thing will always have a fragmentational aspect to it. And when it has the fragmentational aspect, there will be a sense of density and effort, simply because you've got two things that are trying to collide. But again, right, the bubble, we go back to that bubble example. I promise we're going to create some sort of CGI video that's going to bring that concept to life. It's so cool, right? It's gray and lifeless. You merge with that state, everything comes to life. And ultimately, here's the thing. What does Neville talk about when it comes to creating a new reality for yourself? He says that your new concept of self must exist to such a degree that it pushes all other ideas out of consciousness. What he's saying here is you can't even have 10% of that limiting concept existing in you if you truly want to see the fruit here. And the truth is, it's absolutely possible for you. The biggest problem that most of us have in regards to transmuting limiting beliefs, letting go of limiting beliefs, installing new beliefs, is our stubborn unwillingness to let go of what we've believed to be true for so long. And this is why we get you to source consciousness, to realm one, because the ego very much looks for security in beliefs. But we know that as long as my security is in a belief, I'm at risk. I'm at risk to be tossed to and fro. And that's exactly how it was when I was religious. My security was tied to the belief that I had, the interpretation I had of God. And that's the amazing part. Because when my security, which is really honestly my fundamental identity that exists independently of what you and I refer to as Michael, when I understand that you can't harm that, you can't touch that, you can't kill that, you can't destroy that, you can't impurify that, you can't inadequate that, you can't freaking do anything to it. Dude, what happens? What happens when I stop living as the ginger named Michael and I start living as the consciousness from which this universe comes into being from? What happens when I stop giving myself a reason to stay limited? I experience freedom, but freedom is scary. Marianne Williamson says that it's not our darkness, but our light that frightens us. And I believe she's right. Because when your light shines bright, it's known, especially as it shines into the darkness. Use that rhetorically. But the truth is, a city that's set on a hill can't be hidden. So what the fuck are you doing? Are you going to keep your light under a bushel, under a basket, right? Are you going to keep it, hidden under this cup. I would turn it upside down, but it's halfway full of water. Are you going to live in it? Are you going to bask in it? And it can be scary. It's okay. It can piss some people off. Who cares? Eventually, you're going to realize that it's not worth it to live another moment adhering to somebody else's truth for you. There is never going to be a time when there is more or less of a benefit to adhering to somebody else's concept of you. And so we talk about the zero density state being a place where action is inspired, right? Transcendent. It's channeling through the mind and the body. It holds no density. And so action that's taken is automatic and without effort. And the effort begins, and we talk about effort, we talk about frustratingness, hardness, and not even hardness as in busting your ass, hardness as, oh my God, I don't know if I'm capable of doing this. Because the only time you would even entertain that sort of belief is when you're occupying a state of separation. And so I can tell you this, the one thing, if you chose to be mindful over anything over the next 6 months, if you just chose to be mindful of when you were feeling separate from what you want and reconciled that energetically every single time, you would go to the moon more than Bitcoin did 2 years ago. Because density causes slowness. No density is quickness. And that is why light is the fastest moving object in our universe. Because according to our scale of weights and structures and mass, light is, as a photon, is the least mass particle in existence. Technically, they say light is massless. And because it is massless, it travels faster than anything else. And think about this. Think about this. The heavier and the bigger things are, the slower they get. Like the galaxy, I think, moves 10 times slower than our solar system. Our solar system moves 10 times slower than our planet rotates. As mass increases, as density increases, heaviness and weight increases. And so the zero density state holds no density. And so any action taken is automatic and without effort. And what we want to do is we want to start to deconstruct desire. Let me look at this chat, make sure we're doing good. Good stuff. Action without density. I love it. So we want to deconstruct desire for a second. Why do we struggle to manifest? Think about this, right? We struggle to manifest because we take ownership over our desires. But who the heck are you to freaking take ownership over your desires? Because you're not even real. You're just a rubber band ball of beliefs. And you and your seeming realness, you take ownership. Oh, it's my desire. I want $1 million. Dude, so do 50 million other people. You know, we act like our desires are so unique. They're not. The reason I'm convinced our desires are shared. I don't even ascribe a sense of my ownness to my desires. Because, and I've seen this, if I have a desire and I don't act on it and I don't really take it and I don't run with it and I don't integrate it and I don't sit with it, I tend to see that very thing manifested through somebody else relatively soon after. I swear to God, before Drop It Like It's Hot came out from Snoop Dogg, I had that melody in my consciousness. Now, whether that's true or not, I can't tell you, but I've seen the principle repeat itself over and over and over again. If you will not take up the mantle of releasing ownership, but retaining the joy of desire, it's going to go to somebody else. We struggle to manifest because we take ownership over our desire. This is my desire and it's for me. No, dude, your desire is not just for you. By the way, your desire is for everybody else around you. Because your joy, your abundance inadvertently affects those closest to you. That $1 million helps your parents as well, if you're not an asshole. That 7-figure business impacts clients. That Rolls Royce transports your family, your friends, your significant other. I mean, your desires really are not even about you. They are the consciousness that we are wanting to enrich itself in all of its forms and fashions. And this is why I think service-driven desires actually come faster than ego-driven desires, because when we carry service as a priority, we feel light. And when we carry service as a priority from a place of knowing that service is this infinite being that I am working through me, where's the density? It doesn't exist. But oh man, I need that $1 million, dog. I need that Tesla, dog. I need that 7,500 square foot mansion, dog. I need that. No, you don't. But that sensitive need is going to definitely keep you away from it. Because the king gets what he wants because he knows who he gets. He knows who he is. The queen gets what she wants because she knows who she is. And the peasant always asks because they know who they are. That's just the reality of it. I'm not laughing at the peasant, but the same exact principle applies. I mean, and this dynamic can literally apply in so many different places. How many times have you seen somebody, maybe you've done this in a job that you've had before, you decide to step into some real power and you start ascending some sort of ladder and people are noticing you're really embodying your center and moving with flow. But most of us struggle to manifest because we take some personal responsibility. We say, well, my desire is mine, but it's like, can you find a place inside of you where your desire originates from? No, of course not. Your mind recognizes desire, but the source of the desire is prior. And that's why Neville says desire is a prophetic word of God. Like, think about that. We put it in evangelical context. If I'm saying something to somebody that they've never told anybody else, and I'm calling it a prophetic word of God, that's not coming from me. That's not coming from me. I am just receiving and transmitting. Right? Your desires do not flow to you, they flow through you. And if you can't give the energy of manifested desire time of day inside of yourself without resistance, you're going to continue to perpetuate the struggling cycle. You're amazing. Why do you play small? There's no reason. There's no rhyme. Stop making yourself do more time. That's why we're here this weekend, aren't we? The mind recognizes desire, but the source of desire is prior, right? Again, we talk about the aether, right? This place where form and matter comes from, realm one, this sort of, we can look at it as a soup, right? A soup which contents contain all of everything that we could possibly conceive or fashion. And it transmits itself into a singular interface and is conditioned, right? What is desire? Desire is literally the energy that we are conditioned into form. Because think about it. If I have a desire for a lot of money, again, knowing that I don't want the thing, I want the feeling that I think the thing is going to bring me. Well, my desire for a lot of money, the feeling is satisfaction, it's happiness, it's contentment, all the things that I think I'll have once I have enough money. Isn't that the same energy of the being that I am? And so who really is getting in the way of desire flowing effortlessly other than ourselves when we decide to sit here and take ownership and condition and rationalize. Well, I can't get this because they said that. Who cares? Who cares? God doesn't. I don't. I really don't give 2 cents about anybody's excuses because their excuses are their excuses. And this is also why Neville says, stop trying to change the world. Stop trying to change people. Go to your prayer closet. Change your conception of yourself, because as you change your conception of yourself, you will literally change how you interpret and react and intercorrelate with the experiences that you have. And the chances are, as you redefine yourself in secret, in silence, in darkness, and you come into the light will reflect the redefinement that you've created. Look in the chat here. Good stuff. You guys are fucking too cool, man. I love all of you with my whole heart. Okay. So realm 1 contains all potentiality of the universe, right? It's the soup, man. It's the Campbell's of all of existence. And desire is the force or the impulse that channels potentiality into expression. Like we said, if you don't take up the desire, somebody else will, because the desire is not yours in the first place. So man, what if I could really integrate that and recognize that, hey, my desire to build Reality Hacker, it's not mine. It's literally consciousness's desire to know and experience itself. That's a fucking cluster bliss. How cool is that? That Reality Hacker is consciousness's desire to know and experience itself. I just decided to open myself up to it. Jen just decided to open herself up to it. Dave just decided to open himself up to it. You are deciding to open yourself up to the totality of the universe, wanting to have fun, because all this is one big gigantic sandbox from which anything is able to be conceived and created, because nothing exists outside of your awareness. And because your awareness is God, anything that you can possibly conceive is real. Sorry if I'm blowing out your speakers, but not really. You couldn't conceive it if it wasn't possible, because the very mechanism that you use to conceive is the same mechanism from which everything in this physical universe comes into being from. Right? We posted this meme on the Reality Hacker Instagram, and it was a more of a non-dual meme, and it's the kid and the dad, and the kid's like, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to realize the self. And in the next frame, he says, why are you so dejected? If it was impossible for you to realize the self, you wouldn't be here. By the very nature of existence, you are able to realize the self, or realize the being that you are, because that's what really the fuck you are. Like, that's what you really are. You're just stuck in this delusion that you're Marco, that you're Jen, right? That you're Michael. You're just stuck in the delusion, and it's okay. Nobody's going to judge you. That's why you're going to look back on this and they call it a cosmic joke, because you're going to realize, holy shit, I spent all that time deluding myself into thinking I was some sort of fucking limited being, when in reality, I was this massive, omnipresent, omnipowerful consciousness the entire time. Cluster bliss, baby. Realm 1 contains all potentiality of the universe. Desire is the force or impulse that channels a potentiality into expression, and ultimately your ability to take the tonality of that desire and not interfere it, but enjoy it. When we talk about enjoying the feeling of a desire, I want you to think for a second, and I don't know if any of you live here, but I want you to think about sitting at a table in Santorini, Greece. And I want you to think about eating a maybe you don't like Granny Smith apples. I personally love them, right? Think about an apple that's really tasty or a fruit that you really enjoy. And I want you to think about yourself sitting at this table in Santorini, 75 degrees, 80 degrees, light wind chill. You're just hanging out. You're munching on this fruit. You're in the Garden of Eden, right? When we talk about enjoying a desire, that's exactly what we're talking about. See, because in that moment, I'm not evaluating my environment. I'm not evaluating the fruit. I'm not evaluating the ground. I'm not evaluating the water, the temperature. I'm enjoying. I'm not placing conditions on what I am experiencing. I am simply enjoying. And I will tell you this, desire loves to express itself through those that choose to enjoy it without condition. And when you can enjoy it without condition, quote, God will give you anything beyond what you can even ask or imagine. So when we break this down, we understand the cycle, right? We want to understand the logistics. Know yourself, and you will know the universe and the gods. Potentiality exists in realm 1 and realm 2. Ultimately conditions itself in realm 3, right? Potentiality, the potential, the possibility. And when it moves into realm 3, mind, imagination, states of consciousness, beliefs, rationalizations, assumptions, inner stories, inner dialogues, identities, thoughts, ego, when it moves there, it begins to form. And what's going to happen here is if you're able to leverage these without creating a wall of resistance, this wants to flow all the way here. And what happens for most of us is the desire comes usually right in this area. This is when it comes upon us, when it enters our awareness. And most of us use these mechanisms here to justify why it's not here yet, why I can't have it, why it is such an objective thing independently existing from me. And in there, we increase the density, we stop the flow, and everything backs up. But if we do this successfully, if we enjoy the desire like we enjoy the apple or the fruit in Santorini, desire loves to flow through us here. And so there's never going to be a situation. There's never going to be a situation when what is filtered to here does not come out here. Because the truth is, this potentiality will come upon you. The desire comes upon you. And if you give it resistance, you do. You block it up. You stop the flow. You're going to manifest regardless, because we manifest literally as a byproduct of our very existence. Manifestation is, and this is really important to understand, manifestation is not something you choose to do. It's something that happens as a byproduct of who you are. You could not stop manifesting even if you wanted to, because you are literally the source from which this entire universe comes into being from. How could you possibly stop manifesting? How could you stop generating, right? If we want to use that word, you can't. So this is the reality of this situation. You understand that you're not going to stop manifesting. And so how you integrate this desire here ultimately becomes everything. Because you start conditioning this, you start forming this, you start giving yourself justifications. Guess what? That density, it filters here. And you watch the density and you see it and you observe it. And then, because the brain likes to find things to confirm its own beliefs, the world will confirm your convictions. The world confirms your convictions. So desire is source, this infinite intelligence that we are bringing a particular expression into form through you, and there are infinite forms and expressions. And this is why, something I've noticed specifically with desire, in our fast-paced society, we tend to, most of us, come to this place where desire happens. We say, oh, wow, this would be amazing. And then we get nervous because we think other people might have this or accomplish this. And at least for myself, I see this in business. This has been, if we're getting transparent and vulnerable, right? Business, especially when it comes to business ideas. If you know me, I have 1 million companies, and I'm going a mile a minute, right? When it comes to a lot of this stuff. And my biggest thing here, my biggest catch up is when I allow myself to be driven by any sense of separation, right? If I have a desire and I immediately interpret, say, oh, well, if I don't do this, somebody else will, blah, 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 blah. That actually puts me into a state of lack. And what's really important to understand, and this is something that we have a hard time understanding, is the truth is, even if you miss out on a desire, even if you don't fulfill it, it's okay. Like there are an infinite number of desires. And I truly believe that the greater consciousness that we are is aware, or should I say the deepest desires that we have are truly manifesting. I will say that the tonalities, the infrastructure of my life that I have wanted to create, even in the middle of a lot of my surface level desires, have continued to come to pass. Whether things get upheaved, right? Whether new things get planted, I can always see how my deepest desires are forming themselves for me. And so the best thing you can do when it comes here is ultimately understanding that desire is infinite intelligence, bringing a particular expression into form through you. Your job here is to be a conduit, a vehicle, right? Like the glass prism that we talked about at the beginning of our lesson. Your job is to be a vehicle, a conduit, right? I mean, think about a car trying to take ownership of itself. Obviously, that's weird, but it doesn't make any sense, right? Imagine your car telling you, I own you, human. I mean, here's the thing. Maybe Elon Musk is going to invent AI Tesla that eventually does that. Let's be honest. But ultimately, you don't see the vehicle claiming ownership. You see the vehicle being a vehicle to get from A to B, from B to C, C to D. The vehicle really has no intention of its own. I mean, in a lot of ways, you having a destination, going to get in your car taking you to where you want to go. Like there are so many correlations here between that and how desire flows through us, right? You are the car. Desire is the you that's getting into the car. And depending on how well-tuned your car is, depending on how in shape your car is, depending on how well working your car is, that will determine how you get from A to B. So your job here is to make the vehicle work well, to understand the vehicle, because that's the thing. If you understand the vehicle, even if it breaks down, you know exactly how to fix it, right? It's not about just, oh, let me look at the windshield wipers. No, let me understand how oil and gas and intakes and things that I personally don't understand about cars work, so that no matter what happens, I can keep the car working and in well condition to always get where it needs to go. It can take desire where it needs to go. That's the thing. If you're feeling like shit, if you're unhealthy, if you are willfully out of shape and doing nothing to support cardiovascular health, health of your blood, all these different things, again, there's no judgment, but think about how much more convoluted the process of desire flowing through you becomes. If all you're doing is feeding yourself things that make you heavier, right? If you're eating candy that puts heavy metals in your body, right? If all you're doing is decreasing the quality of the vehicle, how much harder does it make it for desire to flow through you? And one thing most of the time I feel like you see with successful manifestation is well-being, mind, body, spirit. Successful manifestation is the byproduct not only of self-knowledge, but maintaining the vehicle the desire flows through. The mind likes to take responsibility for desire, but desire is not born from realm 3, from the mind, right? The mind likes to take responsibility for desire, but desire is not born from the mind. So, if desire isn't born from the mind, why do we need to take responsibility for it? And I want you to think about that too. Think about what happens energetically in your body when you take responsibility for a desire. You immediately become heavy. You immediately become heavy. How am I going to make this work? How is this going to happen? What do I need to do? Blah, 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 right? It's density. Yeah, exactly. What a relief that desire is born of source consciousness and not of mind. I love that Zoom added reactions to chat. Super cool. The mind likes to take responsibility, but desire is not born from the mind. When we identify with realm 3 and 4, desire carries density, we feel effort, we feel lack, we feel powerlessness, and this is because we believe our mind and body to be responsible for its fulfillment. But as we know, our doingness can never exceed our beingness, and our beingness can never exceed our self-convictions. The mind and body are vehicles for fulfillment. They are not responsible for fulfillment. They are vehicles through which fulfillment flows. They are not the only container from which desire is able to make itself known. And it's super important to understand this, because when we talk about you are the universe, and we talk about manifesting, we talk about consciousness and awareness, when you are entering into a state of joy, right? When you're entering into a state of fullness or satisfaction, think about how that affects the mind and body in relation to fulfillment. You immediately have a sense of ease. You're not concerned with trying to control. And most of the time, the resources that you need, the people that you need, they make themselves known at the right time. But for most of us, especially because we come into this manifestation space from fight or flight, the deeper sense of need that we carry ultimately is the single ingredient that creates destruction. Because that sense of need, even if it takes up 2% of your consciousness, it will be experienced. And it's not something to judge yourself for. It's more of a, can I let go of the sense of responsibility in my body to make this thing happen? Can I let go of the sense of need that I feel around this thing? Yeah, especially around money. During my Christian years, I was homeless for quite a while. I slept under bridges at one point. This was back in like 2013. I had no choice but to relinquish myself, to surrender. And it was amazing because you know what? Yeah, I did sleep under bridges, but I always found something, right? Maybe it was a meal, you know, maybe it was a pair of clothes, maybe it was a message on Facebook. Somebody helped me get a place to stay. I was always able to attract because I kept myself in that place. I knew if I allowed myself to dive into the quantification of separation, I would take myself very far from where I wanted to go. And so we identify with realms 3 or 4. Desire then carries density, and we feel effort, lack, and powerlessness, right? And so when we talk about identifying with a realm, what we're really talking about is what our self-concept is looking like in that moment. Because regardless of how you spin this, your self-concept determines the biochemical response that happens in your body. So when we're using words like realms 3 or 4, they're really just conceptualizations of meaning so that you can understand where you need to be biochemically in order to support the process of desire flowing through you in the most effortless way. And as long as we're identifying with realm, you can tell, this is how you can tell if you're identifying with realm 3 and 4, is are you expecting your mind and body to be responsible for the fulfillment of desire? It's only something you can determine. So this is the key shift, right? Because desire is born from realm one, which includes all potentiality and intelligence of the universe, desire contains its own plan of fulfillment. We are not personally responsible. And the truth is, for being completely honest here, in a context of duality, the bigger your desire, the bigger the dream, the bigger the vision, the more people that are involved. And I was watching a video the other day from a guy in the space, his name's Alex Hormozi, and he talked about, this guy owns, like a $185 million empire of businesses. And he talked about the more successful he became, the less actual interference he had in the work he did, right? Obviously, it makes a lot of sense. You grow a company, you get more people, right? It's exactly what's happening here at Reality Hacker. You grow your vision, the bigger your vision, the more is required. And I use that very lightly, right? But so much of the time, we have these massive visions and we make ourselves personally responsible. But it's like, man, what if this was the byproduct of source experiencing itself through multitudes of forms that come together into the realization of what it is that I want? It reminds me of that statement, let go and let God, and it's obviously, an elementary statement for what we're talking here, but it conveys the same truth, right? Desire contains its own plan of fulfillment. And here's the thing, how I know desire contains its own plan of fulfillment? Because when I sit with a desire and I enjoy it, I get the inspiration to take the action that results in the manifestation. I didn't know any of those things before. But desire comes upon me, I sit with it, I enjoy it, and then I'm inspired to do things that then result in the manifestation, the physical manifestation. And as long as I'm sitting here getting in the way and questioning and blah, 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 rationalizing, taking responsibility, I'm just going to screw myself. Because you deserve satisfaction, you deserve joy, you deserve peace, and you take it away from yourself by rationalizing why you can't have, be, and do whatever you want. And honestly, the goal of this weekend is to help you understand that all of your stories about why you can't have, be, and do what you want, they're all complete, total bullshit. They are, because they're fundamentally untrue, because you're not real. Your identity as an individual is not objective. It is a collection of beliefs. Again, rubber band ball, man. Rubber band man. I think there's a song, an old rap song that talks about that. Right? I'm the rubber band man. Really, just a bundle of beliefs and that's the thing. I think that's why certain animals, especially animals, function in a different way. I think humans exist the way they do because our ability. So it's actually been proven. Scientists at MIT did studies on the brain and showed that the brain actually captures memory in multiple dimensions. It doesn't capture memory linearly. It captures it in multiple dimensions. And that's exactly why we're able to remember the past while being in this moment. Remember something that didn't happen while it's happening now. If you notice, that sort of memory exists in animals, but it doesn't exist to the same degree. And it's not that animals are any less valuable, but as you notice, most animals aren't self-aware. Like my cat will look at himself in my sliding glass door and jump at himself and try and fight himself. And it's okay, right? We look at that self-awareness, and that's exactly why sophistication in the animal kingdom doesn't appear the way it does in human society, because the way consciousness relates to itself in animals is completely different than how consciousness relates to itself in humans. Oh my God, somebody shared the Rubber Band Man song. It's amazing. So the key shift, understanding desire being born from realm one, which includes all potentiality and intelligence of the universe. Desire contains its own plan of fulfillment. We're not personally responsible. So desire is realm one, or source, expressing itself, conditioning itself through thought, feeling, and the material world. Desire is not yours. You are simply a channel for source to experience itself. In other words, you are the totality of the universe experiencing itself subjectively, and there is nothing that you will ever be able to do that's going to change this one fact. So you might as well settle into it, homie. You might as well settle into the fact that you're full, that you're whole. And you might as well accustom yourself to getting out of your shitty stories about yourself. Because the only person, I mean, you are hurting a ton of other people based on how much you're limiting your own ability to impact them when you're entertaining shitty stories. But the truth is, man, the one who's really missing out when you entertain stories of limitation is you. And this is why I love service-driven visions. A, because it's always more blessed to give than it is to receive. And if you've truly given, you understand what that means. 9 times out of 10, giving somebody something that I know radically affects them, transforms their life, is a million times of a greater feeling than getting something that I want. And I like that because it presents lightness. And interestingly enough, in my big vision, let's just take my space vision for a second, I'm forced to become a very specific person. I'm forced to be able to handle things in a very specific way. There's requirements of emotional intelligence, of relating to humans, of interpreting transactional values, of speaking to people. I mean, there's so many, they say this about entrepreneurship, but I really believe personal development is not about the things that you come into possession of. It's about the person that you become in the process. Because I'll tell you what, you take yourself now, 6 years from now in the future, or 6 years in the past, so many things change as far as the nuances around desire. Because so many of our desires are forming partially in relation to where we are in our lives. That's the amazing thing about desire. It's not mine, but it comes in relative to who and what I am. And as you can recognize yourself to be a channel for realm one, right? For beingness, for consciousness to experience and express itself. Think about it. I mean, think about this. What does it mean for consciousness to experience itself? Okay, so the substance of consciousness is joy, peace, satisfaction, fulfillment, contentment, freedom. And you have a desire that results in all of those things. You are literally participating in the universe's desire to know itself, to experience itself. You, by being a vehicle for consciousness to move through, for desire to move through, succeed in the literal process of the universe coming to know itself. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I was probably like 5 when that song came out. Because Source is infinite intelligence, it knows your desires before your mind recognizes them. When we surrender to Source in this way, we achieve that zero density state. And this is why when a desire comes upon us and we surrender to it, we enjoy it, we sit with it like a friend, right? We achieve that zero density state. We're on that flow, that high vibrational disc, as Abraham might call it. We surrender to the feeling that is being experienced. We allow that feeling to pervade our bodies, to pervade our consciousness, and we run with that. When we surrender to Source in this way, we achieve the zero density state. Surrendering to Source, right? Surrendering to realm one, surrendering to my fundamental identity, right? When we talk about surrendering, we talk about accepting. That's what this is. You're accepting that you are realm one, that you are originating, that who you are, the consciousness that you are, originates in realm one. So surrendering to this is the practical way to manifest with effortlessness, speed, and certainty, right? Because we're bringing a couple factors into play. The law of least effort the lightness of zero density, in other words, not assigning a ton of complicated meaning to what I want, and ultimately the knowledge that everything that I hold to, that I am convicted of, becomes my reality. That's what it means to surrender to source. So in session 3, what we're going to be doing is reverse engineering this state so that you can begin to embody it every day. And I know some of you are eager to get here. We're going to get here tomorrow morning, and I am tremendously excited for how this is unfolding. This could not have been going better than it has. If there's one thing that you should get out of this session, it's understanding that the zero density state is always available to you, and it is waiting for you to step into it. And to the degree in which you can get out of your own way, you can move into the zero density state. And that concludes session 2. What I'd like to do is take some time and open it up to the hot seat. I want to make sure that we get everybody gets a chance to talk and ask. But is there anybody that'd like to come up? Steve, how's it going? I believe you are muted. There you go.
It's like fucking amazing. It is, it is like, you know, the last thing that you said, treat your desire like a friend. I was treated it like a wild animal that had to be captured, and I didn't have a weapon on me. You know, it was like, you know, just to, you know, can I make it any harder for myself? But this is like so, can I dare to say easy?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's profound.
I love it. I love how you refer to desire as a, you know, as an untamed animal. And I think for a lot of us, especially if we grow up in rigid structures, it does appear as that. I mean, you know, in certain religious circles, you're instructed to suppress desire. You're instructed to treat it as this almost negative thing, you know. And when we begin to give ourselves permission to look at our desires as good things that serve us, all of a sudden, so much of the resistance that we carry, it begins to fall away.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you, God.
Absolutely.
You.
Look, we've still got 4 more hours of this tomorrow. I am tremendously excited. I think that the biggest thing that we should be understanding here is ultimately, and honestly, you're going to lead right into it, right? There is no ego-driven desire or source desire. All desires come from the source that we are. And then, as Patricia said, right, we get into this place of separation, and that's when convolution comes into play, right? Because at the end of the day, if a desire doesn't come from you, there's no way it can be ego-driven. If desires originate from infinite potential, there's no way a desire can be ego-driven, even if it serves your ego. Even if your desire is for people to know who you are, isn't that literally the whole purpose of existence? The universe seeking to know itself, right? And this is where we want to get out of, like, it does. And you know, a lot of people, they ask me, they say, Michael, how do I know what I want? Well, the truth is you don't. But in order to figure out what you really want, you should go after what you think you want, because in going after what you think you want, you'll figure out whether or not it's what you really want.
Yeah. It's like my whole purpose as an actor, if I had to define it, and it changes, but it's pretty close to what it's ever been, is I am the odd man out on his way to becoming the odd man in, but still the odd man. And people should see that, because there are a lot of us out there.
Yeah. What's so interesting about acting too, is that acting is so almost reflective of the process that we, that we take here, right? When you're acting, especially if you're researching a role, you're going to do everything you can to be able to allow that personality to come through you. You're going to study the role of the person of the role that you're playing. You're going to study even the smallest nuances, how they move their face, what their expressions are like. You're going to explore what their beliefs are about themselves. Right. When you're acting, you're literally taking on an entirely new personality. You're moving into a new state of consciousness. And I'm sure you've seen this, Steve, how many actors end up fucking up their lives because they can't get out of the personality that they entered into when they started acting for a certain role. You know, I've heard of actors that, like, for their entire duration of a movie, they will wear the personality of the person that they're acting,
Yeah.
even during breaks and cuts and lunches. You know, I think Jim Carrey is an example of that. I've heard that's older, not more of his newer stuff, but in older movies, you know, of the role he was playing, that would carry on even when the cameras were off.
Wow. And he has said that that acting became very painful for him.
Yeah.
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 Well, folks, what a freaking day. What a freaking day, man. Okay. Listen, this is just the beginning. We've got 4 more hours, and then we've got 6 weeks of support for you. Marco and Jen, 2 of our coaches here at Reality Hacker, both have been with us for a very long time, are going to be providing support to you guys throughout the next 6 weeks. I'm just excited to watch you all encapsulate this state and wear it, because the truth is, there is no greater place to be. There is no greater place to be than the freedom of Realm 1, where I am not attached or obligated to anything other than my energy. Right? That Drake song, Energy, you know? This is what this is all about. The zero density state is honestly and should be the final solution for your manifesting struggles. And I can promise you, like they say in AA, keep coming back. It works if you work it. So yes, over the next 6 weeks, we're going to have a call once a week. And I believe Jen is going to be hosting that. Amazing, amazing, amazing stuff there. And then we will have a community resource, the Telegram, that we are using will be available for all of you. What I'm going to do is stop the recording. Well, before I do that, does anybody else like to come up to the hot seat? Would love to bring up somebody that has the courage to get down and dirty up here. If not, it's your loss. It's not mine.
I wasn't sure how to do the hand raising thing. I never used Zoom.
All right. Well, there you are. What's up, Mike?
Hi. So a lot of the work I've been doing recently kind of falls more into a Hindu Buddhist belief system, which there's so many threads that lead back to the kind of state of the zero state, the state of joy that you were outlining, that it's really uncanny. And that's one of the reasons I participated this weekend, was to kind of see which threads would kind of appear that led back to that, because all roads, I believe, lead home.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I don't really work with things from a place of a lot of seriousness or a lot of, it's all very fluid. I try to, if it's not, then I try to address it. It's like, why is this working on me in such a dense way? Or why am I working with it and it feels so dense?
Yeah.
And I think one trigger word, especially recently, is karma, and what that might mean, and how everybody seems to have a different definition of it. But I just wanted to share kind of a little insight that I typed right at the end there, because I was feeling that state of joy and that state of unlimited creation, that zero state. And I said, it occurs to me that karma is like not only the effects we may still be dealing with or attached to from fighting this battle previously, but also unrealized desires. Because if those desires exist from source for us to play with and to exercise, whether they last a while or whether they last a short time, if the desire is supposed to be exercised and they're not, it seems to me that that could create an energetic thread of, no matter who takes it over or how it's taken over, to be exercised and to be lived and to be manifested. It's about it being manifested. And so just how, being able to get through desires in order to just be source, just be love, just be joy in its absolute state, even if you come back again and again to then help others do the same and be liberated, I would imagine that just like a breath, all desires having acted, all the infinity having acted out is like the apex of the breath. And then it comes back in and we do it all again. So you might as well get on with it. You might as well have fun with it. You might as well be in joy, baby.
That's so good, man. And I loved your point about karma. I think that, a lot of our karma is the karma that we believe we have. I think the more responsibility we take on, the more karma we generate. I've noticed for myself, there's a direct proportion of the judgment that I hold over myself for something that may have happened 15 years ago, and how that shows up and what that I seem to think that creates in my life today. As long as I hold that condemnation over my head, the karma is real, and karma.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of like if you get too far in your own, that's where you were talking about meaning and belief systems and being kind of a rubber band of beliefs, because that comes into judgment and comes into that self-judgment. And so it just makes it worse. If you try to understand karma, you're going to, that's a bottomless pit, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing, Mike. I really would love if you want to share any notes with us, later on. I think what we'll do is, somebody asked for a workbook earlier. I might try and get notes from the whole audience that anybody wants to share. Maybe we put a collective retreat workbook together for those that are not here this weekend. And really, I think that, we can put a workbook together of our own, but adding notes from you guys would be amazing to the work that we're doing. So make sure to save your notes, folks. They will definitely be valuable coming out here. But Michael, thank you for sharing that. Joe, how's it going, man?
How you doing?
I am doing well. You're looking good.
Oh, thank you. So the thing I wanted to say is that, well, first of all, I'm really glad that I signed up for this, because you just a lot of things you were saying, just I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to articulate this. It's just like, yeah, okay, yeah. And one of the things that you said, I'm looking at, like in my notes here that I took, when you're talking about sports, one of the densest, the hardest action type of things, it brought me back. I hadn't even thought of this. I used to play hockey when I was in high school, a little bit afterwards. I was a goalie, and just having a good time. Things were flowing. I wasn't thinking about, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. If I understood what you're saying correctly, it just made me think that, yeah, to get back in that type of state again would probably be a really good thing. And I never would have thought of that in my whole life. If I can hear you say it, I'm like, wow, I haven't, I was very different when I was playing the game. I wasn't all muddled down and all this stuff.
Yeah. That's why, like, the things that we enjoy the most, the hobbies that we enjoy the most, can usually be like the most beneficial for energy circulation, because when you can just sit in that place where you're not concerned about logistics, right and wrong, and you're just allowing it to flow out of you, like, we accustom ourselves to that state by being there more. And right, what happens, as you said directly, most of the time we grow up and we lose our luster for life, especially the things that we're the most passionate about. And as a result, we end up experiencing more of the resistance, more of the backing up sense of feeling, and that state of flow becomes less and less familiar to us. And that's something I encourage everybody to do, that we encounter, is like, I just got this for Christmas. You know what I mean? And so, big musician, and I'll sit there for an hour playing through an entire album, and I get done, and sure, I'm sweating, but I'm more exhilarated than I've been all day. There's something about giving your body the room to create that memory of flow again. And I love it. So are you gonna get back into, are you gonna play some hockey or what?
Not at my age. I have one friend that's doing it, and he's getting more boo-boos every year. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'll just watch it.
Absolutely. Well, I love that, Joe. Thank you for sharing. I love it so much.
Oh, thank you, man.
Jay, how's it going?
There I go. Hey, Mike, this is wonderful, man. I had been dealing with some distance for I'd say the last 2 to 3 months, trying to work my way out of it. So this is perfect timing, I've had some successes, but, sometimes you run up against the wall and things aren't quite working as they were before. So, yeah, man, I'm just looking for ease and flow now. That's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I think that for you, Jay, the best thing that you can do is just going back to this zero density state, especially as it relates to the struggle, because you have no problem being successful, right? We've talked, we know each other, and you've done a lot of amazing things in your life. And I think that you're continuing to do amazing things. And the only thing that holds you back is when you get in those, you run into those, upper limits, and then they just take us out. You know what I mean? But if we can recognize those upper limits, go back into that zero density state and reapproach them, it makes it so much easier. I feel like you're beginning to actually really see that in action. It sounds like, just based on what you told me with these last couple of struggles, you are able to bring yourself out of it. And that honestly is so much of this process, is being able to recalibrate my consciousness, as woo of a statement as that is, to what is currently going on. Because again, right, looking at it through the lens of lack only allows me to see lack. Looking at the situation through the lens of abundance literally causes me to look for areas of more than enough.
Yeah, I really resonated with when you were talking about being in service, your desire. Man, that felt good.
Yeah.
It just, God, it feels smooth, I could see where, there's no struggle there, you just, and lately when I'm having visions about some grandiose things that I want to do, I am thinking about other people.
Yeah.
It just,
And it feels amazing, huh?
yeah, it does. It does.
Like service-driven visions are so powerful, because they do, like, especially when you're approaching it from this place of I am infinity, experiencing itself subjectively. So technically, there's really no end to the service I can provide. If you really begin to approach it from that perspective, you're like, what can I not do?
Right.
How can I not serve people?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I want other people to have fun too.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why we created Reality Hacker, man. And I'm just so glad you're with us. You've been with us for quite a few years now, and I'm so grateful we're running together.
All right, man. Thanks.
Thank you. Vanessa, I did see your hand up. Did you want to share anything?
Sure. All I really want to say is just thank you for this. It's profound, and this container is very powerful. All the people that are here, you can just really feel the frequency of it. And, that's very much in direct reflection of you and Dave and Jen and Reality Hacker and all that you are. And, you're an extraordinary teacher. And I love every time you say you're not real and then you laugh. It's one of my favorite things. And, the other thing really, truthfully, is, we both share a past history in evangelical Christianity. And I think the thing that I just really kept feeling today is, so much frequency of joy, and how, when I was growing up in that, from that worldview, everything was about, you will know by the fruit. You'll know by the fruit. And that's what I can say about this, about you, about these people here, is that about this work, about this truth, is it yields fruit. It bears good fruit. And that's the testament, that's the testimony. And my life has been changed by it. And I'm incredibly grateful to be in service and to be part of it, and to continue to learn eternally. And it's just brilliant. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. I don't want to say anything after that. I am just so grateful. Every time we do these, I find myself more and more grateful to be here, because I just get the opportunity to tell you what you already know deep down. And I get to help light that fire. And I'm such a big fan of lighting things on fire. I mean, not literally, but you know what I mean. But sometimes figuratively. But I'm super grateful for this space. So I'm going to end this recording.